This video captures another one of Indonesia's national interest priorities, that is to have an immigration and refugee policy. This image here demonstrates some of the challenges that the region faces, and more specifically, it looks at Australia's response. The cartoonist is suggesting that what Australia does with asylum seekers is simply push them under the carpet of Southeast Asia. To build a little bit of context around this issue of refugees and asylum seekers, you can see from this map of Africa that there are very large numbers of refugees across Africa. In some of these states, we're looking at over 600,000 refugees, and these are people who cannot be in their home country because of fear of persecution. More specifically, this map zooms in on Eastern Africa, and again it shows the complexity of the problem when you've got neighbouring states, each of which has hundreds of thousands of refugees, or people who are internally displaced, meaning they cannot be near their homes. Specifically in our region, this map shows us some of the cities and islands in Indonesia where boats depart from on their way to Australia. So it is very common for asylum seekers to fly into Indonesia, to make their way to these ports and these islands, to board boats, and attempt to make the crossing to Australia in order to apply for refugee status. Globally, the world has about 10.4 million refugees. We also have about 15.5 million displaced people. So if someone is internally displaced, it means that within their home country, they are away from their home. It might be because of natural disaster. Refugees, on the other hand, have a genuine fear of persecution. And there are currently over 800,000 asylum claims. So these are people who have formally claimed asylum with UNHCR and are waiting to hear about their status, waiting to be relocated to a safe place. Briefly, we have three definitions. One is an asylum seeker, a person who fears persecution within their home country, and they are seeking protection. They're seeking refugee status. So they don't yet have this status. A refugee is a person who fears persecution and has been recognised as being a refugee. They may be in a new state or waiting to be accepted into a new state. And another term which we don't want to confuse with these first two is that of a migrant. A migrant is simply anyone who leaves their own country for reasons that are not related to persecution. So if you move to a new country for employment, you move to another country to be closer to your family or to study, you would be termed a migrant. The last thing to keep in mind are the two international laws that relate to people movement. The first one is the 1951 Convention relating to the status of refugees, and the second one is the 1967 Protocols relating to the status of refugees. But why is this an issue that matters for Indonesia? We have a cartoon here. It's the Indonesian government, or someone representing the Indonesian state, speaking to the Australian Minister for Migration saying, "We've already got millions of refugees. We don't want these refugees who Australia is trying to push onto us." And so this context is one where Indonesia already hosts a number of refugees, about 3,000. These are people who have been recognised as refugees, but also a large number of people claiming asylum, people seeking protection. One of the key issues here is that of sovereignty versus states working together multilaterally to resolve the problem. Does a state like Indonesia give up some of its power and authority to work multilaterally with other states, or does it maintain its power by not signing international laws? Because if they choose to sign these laws, they can be held accountable. So the tension is between international treaties and laws and pursuing your own solution.
This map is going to capture one response from Indonesia. Is there's two things.
all the countries in green, or states in green, have signed the Refugee Convention. So all the states in green, they're responsible to sign up to national laws that look after refugees and recognise that refugees exist. You can see Indonesia and most of the ASEAN countries are not signatories. Firstly, Indonesia's response is to not sign international law. They've decided the best thing they can do in their national interest is not recognise refugees. So we can probably identify some ethical issues with that, but the state isn't necessarily an ethical institution. It has national interests to achieve. They've decided not to sign these laws. It means they don't have any obligations to refugees. We have obligations, legal obligations. Indonesia does not. Instead, they've passed anti-people smuggling laws. They've passed domestic laws. Page 25. If you don't want to get it out, you can listen. But the stat is on the board. Indonesia's parliament has passed tough new laws aimed at combating people smuggling. The new laws passed by Parliament on Thursday as part of a broad bill that overhauls much of the country's immigration system introduces penalties of up to 15 years in prison for people convicted of people smuggling offences. With Indonesia being the key departure point for asylum seeker boats heading to Australia, the move to finally criminalise people smuggling is sure to be welcomed by Canberra. So Indonesia's response is to not sign international law, but to pass domestic law. They can control domestic law, they can change it. They're not permanently fixed to helping refugees in the way that we are. One half of their response. The second half is the Bali process, a multilateral process. Page 23. Yes. So the first one was unilateral. What did it do on its own? It passed domestic laws on its own. However, there is also a multilateral response. An agreement between, that should be 45 states. It changes. States keep coming on board. I would change that to 45 if you're writing it down. Because that's literally on the website. It says 45, even though every year or every 6 months, more states jump on board. No one's going to look that up. You can use either figure. An agreement between over 45 states to work together. Aim, eliminate people smuggling. Facilitate cooperation. And yes, I do want you to get out the subject reader and to do this little activity. So there's one page, page 23. I've copy-pasted the agreement. And all I want you to do is to highlight each example you see, cooperation, you think highlights states working together. Anything about togetherness or cooperation, highlight it. Should only take you a couple of minutes.